Many mask cults live in a world where fantasy is more comforting than their reality. For Gygaxians, this feature of mask psychology has been taken to the nth level. Mostly harmless and quirky, Gygaxians are what people of the 2000s would have called nerds, dorks, geeks, losers. The typical Gygaxian begins their membership in the cult as an apprentice adventurer. They progress through quests assigned to them by the councils of the technomages, and eventually they level up to becoming a journeyman adventurer. At the journeyman state, the Gygaxian must begin purchasing cyberware, bioware, and other enhancements along prescribed lines called class and racial restrictions. Many times, the Gygaxian's personal group helps fund these enhancements with the understanding that their membership fees in their guild will be timely and used to purchase enhancements for others. Finally, the Gygaxian leveling up into being a master adventurer receives full voting rights in the complex society that they have created. Indeed, many of the longest serving and most experienced Gygaxians actually draw a small salary from the various chapters and are essentially paid to play in their augmented reality as a profession. Gygaxian society is partly inspired by the ancient Society for Creative Anachronism, with its duchies, kingdoms, knights, and lords existing within the borders of the real world, and partly inspired by trading card games. Most Gygaxians will build a deck of virtual cards with which they duel other wizards and run their adventures in their augmented reality that overlays all that they actually experience. Jackhead addiction is a common problem with this group of masks, as well as poor social skills and wealth earning. Since many Gygaxians also opt for radical enhancements, they are also the masks most often subject to interventions from concerned family members. Gygaxians divide their numbers up by their artificial kingdoms, and also by predetermined, and I say this in quotes, racial types. The Gygaxians' augmented reality racial type not only overlays them in the augmented reality they experience, but with physical enhancements, they mimic the depictions of these mythological beings. Elves, with their willowy builds and pointed ears, are the most popular. Elven players tend to be eloquent, refined, and also the most fiscally successful. There is actually an elven language, a series of connected real-world properties that serve as a nature preserve and a kingdom, and an elven religion. Many of the more brutal and boorish players prefer to have their skin and skulls altered and roam around as orcs or goblin men. Some never alter their appearance, usually because of income issues, and will mask as humans with fantasy names and wardrobes. The Gygaxians with the most money, however, love to mask as mythological beings by becoming full conversion cyborgs and buying a fantastic body shape. Examples of this include King Faladon Runehammer, formerly John Wilson of Topeka, Kansas, who rules the Gygaxian world as the good dwarven king of the Iron Shard Mountains. Runehammer has purchased a full conversion body that is diminutive in size, but also incredibly durable. He has been the king of the Iron Shards for the past 30 years, having gone through a full conversion at the age of 20, and can be expected to remain the king for the next 50 to 60 years with current medical science. Other Gygaxians opt to place themselves in very fantastic bodies, the prime example being Kirillin Demura of Yokohama, who has purchased 2 full conversion bodies for himself, one of which is modeled after a great fire-breathing dragon. But do not let the fact that most Gygaxians are benign hobbyists distract you from the ones that are actually dangerous. Many players who choose to emulate orcs or goblin men often slip into criminal activity. Typically, this is nothing more than some assault and battery, vandalism, and soccer hooliganism, but sometimes they do branch out into violent crimes such as strong-arm robbery and home invasions. And then there is the Trow. Originally, this subset of Gygaxians called themselves the Cyberdrow, but a gaming company sued the cub successfully for copyright infringement. Angered that the company that produced their beloved fantasy world had turned against them, many of the former Cyberdrow joined a new movement. Trow, T-R-O-W, is an ancient Icelandic word for dark elf. Appropriating this word, the newly minted Trow set up new clubs, defeated a second lawsuit from the company, and made back their lost earnings in a countersuit. But by then, the Trow now had a different set of tastes. Having been distanced from the rest of the Gygaxian society, the Trow became a bit delusional and sociopathic. They began engaging in crimes and building up their own criminal enterprise. They even tried to win recognition as a minority group under international law. Thankfully, that failed. Moving into ever more serious delusions, many of the initial Trow began creating an amalgamated new culture for themselves out of fantasy novels and some dark alternative subcults. One of the greatest contributing sources of this was what they gleaned from the cult of Santa Muerta. Changing the folk saint of criminals into a fantasy dark elf and creating for her an opposing sister deity, the Trow created a society dedicated to the acquisition of power, wealth, and the reveling in pain. Hymns and services to this dark goddess, which they named Kalu, are often performed in their caverns. Sadism for some people is a hobby, for the Trow it is a love affair. And amongst themselves they have instituted a system of indentured service and slavery. Rumors abound of them using app chips to make the slaves submissive and keep them in their place. To supplement their income, many of these Trow were involved in drug pushing, prostitution, and human trafficking, as well as protection rackets in areas where they have placed their caverns. Those that break the programming or leave Trow society are called Greykin. The Greykin are automatically castigated and claimed to be the servants of Kadris, the sister goddess to Kalu, and her worship is usually seen in feel-good ceremonies of song, dance, and orgiastic celebrations under a full moon. These two cults of Trow are at, and I say this in quotes, war, end quotes, and they often keep the bloodletting between them to an agreed-upon level of acceptable violence. But nevertheless, real violence does occur as both groups have given themselves someone to hate and have also distanced themselves from society in general. Not every Gygaxian agrees on the rules by which the kingdoms should be run, not only in the rules with which business is conducted, but by the rules which mock combat should be handled. There is also a great deal of controversy consisting around the lore, the history of the shared gaming world. This leads many an enterprising Gygaxian to claim they will never step foot in a certain kingdom again and try to build their own virtual domain. But these things never last for long, as the convenience and weight and numbers of players for the main game and narrative always outweighs those of these other narratives, even though they're often better constructed and of higher quality. The lesson here is that cyberware, plus bored middle-income nerds, equals more expensive ways to disappoint your parents.